Everyone thinks they know who the top prospects are for 2026, but the market is getting these three completely wrong. Whether you play in a redraft league or a dynasty league, you have so few roster spots you can dedicate to these speculative prospects that you have to be more right than wrong on them. I'm not talking about hype on these guys. I'm going to show you the data and walk you through so you can make own your decisions, because whether you play in dynasty or care about getting ahead in the ADP leagues, you need to see this video before you draft. The first prospect that I think the market is getting wrong is Bryce Eldridge of the San Francisco Giants. There is so much hype around him, which is well deserved due to his exit velocities and all those kinds of things. You can see the top half of this chart on the right here through Prospect Savant, which I've been talking about in my videos, really looks amazing, but the bottom half is a total disaster. And this is what is underlying that can cause him some issues. So most worrying, obviously, is a strikeout rate above 30% and a relatively low walk rate, because that doesn't translate well to the majors. When you're in a slump or you're striking out a lot, you need a walk rate high enough to keep you in the lineup every day. Plus his whiff rate, his contacts, everything looks really, really bad. And when you look at his stats here on the left from MLB Prospect Watch, you can see that even as he went up in levels to AAA Sacramento, his batting average on base was struggling. Even while his slugging OPS looks very solid, and that's what lots of people talk about, his strikeout rates were just way too high for someone of this caliber. I understand why there's so much hype behind them, because San Francisco really needs help and really needs a lot of power since they can't sign free agents to really go there. That's why they had to make a huge trade for Devers. However, he's not ready yet. This is someone you can monitor and keep an eye on the strikeout rate. But you can see here, as I slide down here, even when he got a small cup of coffee just 10 games with San Francisco last year, it did not go very well for him. He only batted 107 with a less than 300 OBP. You can say that's early, but it just says that he wasn't ready and he wasn't adjusting properly to major league pitching. So this is someone I'm going to wait and see on. The potential is huge for in a long-term dynasty keeper league. However, for 2026, this is someone you still need to wait on, because the strikeout rate and the low walk rate and the high miss swing rate is going to be what's limiting his potential for a while. Now, the next prospect that we are going to talk about is Konnor Griffin. He is, in many boards, the number one prospect in all of baseball. In fact, many people are talking about him coming up in 2026 to help out the Pirates, especially since Paul Skeens has been a little bit of pressure on the management and ownership to try to win now mentality, and he would be someone who could help. And same thing to like Bryce Eldridge. The top half of the chart, the exit velocities, there's so much positive data. This data is only for his single A ball, which here, you can see he did make it all the way to high A and double A. So that's why people are saying he's really close and maybe he breaks camp with the team. We'll see what transpires through that. But the one I want to point out here again is such a really low walk rate that even if he does well and makes it to the majors, that usually is capture ceiling. If you talk in my last video, even Jackson Churio, if you don't have a high walk rate in the majors, then there's really no reason for pitchers to not really go after you, and it usually caps your potential. Even with these amazing exit velocities and all the other data looking really well, if your walk rate is too low and you really struggle with those kinds of things, then the pitchers aren't going to be afraid of you and they're going to be able to pick their spots, and you're not going to make them pay for it. So therefore, you're not really going to have your ceiling capped significantly. Look at all the players who do that. That could be Michael Harris. It could be Jackson Churio. There's so many players that struggle with a really low walk rate that can't meet their potential because it holds them back regardless of whether the underlying skills or exit velocities are really high. Now, the third player that I'm going to talk about is Travis Bazzana of the Guardians. So this is someone who was the number one pick in the draft, and people talked about even in 2024 after the draft, maybe he would come up and help the team, and that hasn't been true. And in 2025, he's getting a lot of hype because he, of course, went from early rookie ball all the way to AAA, and finishing the season in AAA, lots of people are talking about him being ready for the Guardians, and there's no doubt the Guardians do need help on offense. They would gladly take someone who could produce to help them try to make another playoff run. However, when you look at the underlying data, again here with the Prospect Savant, his AAA data, which is smaller base size, 26 games, His expected batting average is terrible. In fact, his batting average has been terrible everywhere he's been in his professional debut through 111 games, only 243. And this is someone who has like a really high 60, 65 grade on their hit tool. And so if you're not delivering on that, something you were drafted for, especially at a position that can be a little bit weaker in other areas like second base, and if you're not even meeting that, that's going to be a huge problem. In fact, in the 100 plus games of professional ball with the Guardians almost at the same stops, Chase DeLauder looks like he has a way better hit tool than Travis Bazzana. And Chase DeLauder has way more upside, if you saw my last video, with his potential for high on-base percentage through walking and high power potential. So right now, this is someone who, when you look at this data here, his expected batting average was even lower than what he hit. He hit 225 in AAA, which is not amazing. However, the expected one was 177, so it was even worse than he was showing. He was actually getting fairly lucky. You can see some of his exit velocities are relatively low. His 90th percentile exit velocity is in the 39th percentile. His strikeout rate is relatively high for someone with such a high hit tool. He does walk a ton, which is fantastic. But that usually doesn't carry. You're not going to have, plus 20% walk rates, even if you're Juan Soto in the majors. So therefore, that's not going to translate. But his strikeout rate being at 27% is a little concerning for someone who's proposed to be a very high contact guy that you don't have to worry about. And then you can see even his swing rates, zone swing rates, and contact rates are all relatively lower than expected, which to me says there's something missing in his game that people didn't see when he got drafted in college. Either he's not picking up spin or professional baseball, and when it comes in and he's missing some things because he is not making the types of contact you expect for someone who's drafted #1 overall and who is supposed to come up and immediately help. In fact, this is someone I would actually monitor. This has high bust potential because his on-base percentage being 384 is fantastic because of his amazingly high walk rate, so that'll buy him some time to develop this. But if you can't move the needle on what is supposed to be your highest tool, which in this case is hit tool, then that is a high risk that you're going to not pan out because people are drafting you on this being way above average, and they'll take whatever else you can get in the run and the power and so forth. But if you're not delivering the primary hit tool, then it's all going to start to fall apart for you. So these are 3 people I think you should watch and really sit on the sidelines, really fade them for 2026. It's too risky for your few roster spots that you have. And if there's anyone else you're on the fence about, put them in the comments, and I'll see if I can get to them in my next video.